You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to the Successful Screenwriter Podcast, where we discuss anything and everything screenwriting. Here we interview successful screenwriters and filmmakers to find out just what it takes to make it in the industry. All right, welcome to the podcast. We have on a pretty cool guest today, a local Michigander and stand-up comedian, Jeff Dwoskin. Jeff, thanks for being with us.
Jeff, thank you for having me.
I'm really excited about this. I've been wanting to talk with an expert like yourself on how to write comedy, because to me, it is like this lightning in a bottle thing that I cannot wrap my mind around. And I just want to kind of peek behind the curtain and learn the secrets of writing a good stand-up routine, because I've seen your routine. I think you're absolutely hilarious. So I was really glad that we could get you on the show and kind of peel back that mystery a little bit. But before we get into it, I'd like to get a little bit of your origin story and how you came into stand-up.
I think I've always had like this kind of weird ability to make jokes, not at the expense of people, but kind of joke and get away with it. Right. Where, you know, I evolved through middle school and stuff where there was a harshness to it where that wasn't the case, and maybe people didn't want to be around me. But the thing about being a comedian or any comedian, I think, is when you think to yourself, that bit, I've thought of that. You know, I've done there's something like that goes behind that. What I think sets a comedian apart from normal people is the speed at which they can think of it.
Okay. It's a skill.
Right? So there's some logical conclusions and there's always a unique angle. But a lot of times when you're talking with someone, a comedian is quick and fast. And that is almost part of what everyone's reacting to as well. They just can't believe the speed of which this reaction came from. Right. Came to be, right. So one thing like with comedy is just kind of not being afraid to kind of let that go. But you have to, there's always that fine line between being funny and being
right. Well,
especially if you're like with friends or like in that type of scenario.
Well, let me ask you that before we really get into it then, because I think you just touched upon something and we haven't even got into your origin story yet. But hecklers, right? So you're probably learned the skill of being quick and fast because you have to deal with people that come into your job and start making fun of you.
That's part of it, right? You have to. Hecklers, there's like two kind of tracks with a heckler. Okay. One is, do you actually acknowledge them? Because when you're doing stand-up comedy and you're on stage and you have that microphone and everyone's staring at you, you have the control. Hecklers have a real lack of self-awareness or really don't understand the circumstance that they're in. It's almost like, they're not on the high ground. The comedian has the high ground in this battle.
I understand.
Because we have the microphone. This guy's screaming from the audience, probably drunk. And so, but if you do react, you have to kind of react and then pivot it. Because the key is to get the audience on your side. Once the audience is on your side, then the heckler should kind of quiet down. Or honestly, there's plenty of times where the audience takes over for you.
Oh, nice.
And they'll, I mean, it can get bad, but like where they'll just kind of, they'll turn on the guy.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you don't purposely want to do that, but a guy who makes one comment's one thing. There's always that one guy at one show sometime that thinks he's hilarious and just doesn't stop and literally is ruining it for everyone. And, hopefully the club can escort him out and stuff like that. But yeah, it's that quick wit. And the reason, you watch a headliner, the more headliners on stage, so if you're seeing a guy and he's been 10 years in and he's thousands upon thousands of times on stage, there's a good chance there isn't anything coming at him that hasn't been said before, right?
Right.
So he's probably got a bunch of stuff in his back pocket, like boom, 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 boom. You know what I mean? And it's like you just can't compete against that. If you want to really take down a comedian, go to an open mic to take down a guy that's been on stage 3 times. That'll kind of just shudder, when they don't know what to do. But don't come back 1,000 times later to the same guy and expect not to be taken down yourself. Anyway, so my origin story.
Yes, please.
my origin story was I was a web developer, and one of my early clients was a place called Mark Ridley's Comedy Castle. And Mark Ridley's Comedy Castle, we did their website, and one of the pages on the website was comedy classes. Take a comedy classes, learn how to do, be a comedian on stage. That was just sort of something that had happened. Flash forward, I'm working at Quest Communications, and and I'm the funny guy, right?
Okay.
I wasn't the funny guy in school, but in work, I'm the funny guy.
All right.
And everyone's like, "Oh, you should do stand up. You should do something with this." And so there was like all that encouragement.
Okay.
To me, it was like one of those things I wasn't even sure was a thing. I didn't know how to be, But then I remembered, oh wait, this thing we did. And so I went to the Comedy Castle, and I took this writing class. And I encourage anyone, they probably have them in your city or state. And it's actually just a good exercise to do anyway, that or improv. And so I took this class. This woman, Gilda, was my teacher. And they teach you you can't be taught how to be funny, but you can be taught the structure of how a joke works, like how to think of material and to kind of the patterns and the beats of it, as a baseline core structure that you can then adapt as you get better and more comfortable. And so I took that class, started writing jokes, and did a kind of a graduation class, and everyone came and saw it, and it was great. And when you do comedy and you get like laughs, it's like it's I would think it was the equivalent of like getting a high. It's like it's
a big
incredible
moment.
feeling. It's an incredible feeling, and so you chase it. You just keep chasing it. Sometimes you have bad ones, what I mean? But then you just get back on again, and then you get that good one, and that carries you. And so, I mean, that's kind of how it was. I recognize people encouraged me, which I probably needed a little bit. The comedy class gave me the confidence and practice on being on stage. I don't think I ever could have just walked into an open mic and just walked on stage and just, "Oh, I'm Jeff Dwoskin."
Yeah.
I don't know that wasn't in me. But once I understood the process and the fundamentals behind it, and was, encouraged by this teacher, Gilda, then it all, flash forward 18 years.
Look at that, 18 years in the business. So you got the confidence, and then eventually you're able to get on stage, right? So getting on stage and not in a controlled environment where you're in a class, I mean, that had to be intimidating.
It is intimidating. It's, I think I get intimidated every time. I get butterflies every time before I go on stage. And I worry about the only times that I haven't have been the worst times that I've been on stage. It's sort of like the nerves before getting on stage convert into the energy once I step on that stage.
That makes a lot of sense.
And if that didn't exist prior, then I'm walking out. I'm not walking out fully.
You're walking out empty.
I'm walking out empty. And, it's an interesting thing. You can have two shows. You can do the first show and it's gold. They're laughing, and like sometimes they laugh when they're supposed to laugh, and sometimes they laugh even before they're supposed to laugh. I mean, there's like all definitions of like good shows and and audiences that are awesome and why they're awesome and all that kind of stuff. And then you could have a second show that same night, and they're looking at you like you're speaking Spanish, and like in your head you're like, I mean, if it wasn't a Spanish crowd, and the crowd normally speaks English in this scenario, and so they're looking at you, and you're in your head, you're like, oh my God, this was just the greatest thing just 2 hours ago. So it's like, it's just an interesting thing, different group, different dynamic. They're more tired, they're more drunk.
Yeah, that's what I wonder. It's like, how much does it involve them being inebriated that it affects the way they take the humor? Worse, better? I mean, it's got to be almost like a crapshoot depending on the crowd you get.
I think crowds can be made up of different things, but if it's a decent crowd, meaning like a decent number of people are in the audience, and it's a second show, there's different things that kind of play into it. One, if you just did a show, you have to kind of come back with the same energy, because now you are repeating what you just did. Right. So there is onus on the comedian themselves to come back out and just like the first time, do it like it was the first time.
Yeah.
Not like, oh, I did it again, now I got to get through this again, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So you gotta bring it the same, even though you just did it. And it's weirder the second time when you do it, because the memories of the reactions are fresh in your mind, at least to me, from the first show.
I wouldn't even
like, you'll do a joke
that.
and it'll get a huge laugh, and then you're doing it the second time and it'll get a
oh no.
And it's like mentally that can throw you. Or when I say, I'm speaking for myself, but
no,
I
get it. No, I get it. Yeah.
And so, but then the audience, there's always different factors with the audience. Is it a giant church group? Is it Friday night? And to me, Friday night, everyone always talks about the second show Friday. It isn't so much the second show Friday. It's everyone thought it was a great idea to go to something at 10 o'clock, but they forgot that they're working 40 hours and that when they sit down for that show, it all kind of hits them. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like, like to me, like, so they could be more tired. Right. And then, there's so many factors, is it a group and it's like a bachelorette party and it's the mom and the aunt, and are they going to laugh? And, you know what I mean? It's like, there always used to be one show where it seemed like it was all like the 21-year-olds, where this was just a pivot to get them to, we got to do something to justify them sleeping with us in an hour. You know what I mean? We got to put in some kind of time and energy here. All different variables.
What can throw you because you're performing? It really is a performance. You've done all the work, and then you kind of create this show to put on for people. So it's a one-man show, one-person show. I went to a comedy show in Vegas, and there's some headliners there. Small crowd, and there was a heckler in the front the entire time. And I would have to label them the world's nicest heckler, because during the show, he would just compliment directly to the comedian, and he's first row, right? Drunk as all can be. And it was throwing the comedians off because they didn't know how to deal with a nice heckler. And it was, I don't want to say it was hilarious, but I was also frustrated because you could tell the comedian is trying to work with this heckler, but they didn't want to be mean because the guy was so nice.
I have a funny story where, like, same thing happened to me. It was a second show, and like 6 people showed up to this show, and they still made us do it. But the problem was the 6 people were like friends of mine, but not like my close friends. Like, we know them from school. Our kids go to school together, so
Gotcha.
I know them and we're friendly. But so they would come and they do it. Oh, good one, Jeff. It's like, I think when you're on stage, and can I imagine putting myself in the head of the people that you're talking, the comedian you saw, but it's a monologue, and right, with the comedians performing a monologue, the dialogue part comes in laughs and maybe applause if you're lucky, right? So that's the only dialogue that we feed off of and gives us energy. And that's what gives us energy, the laughing and those positive noises. That's why, like, when someone drops a tray or, heckling, people think heckling is somebody being a jerk, but heckling is any disruption, right?
That makes sense.
If a train goes by, if the man or woman drops a tray in the back, and then makes a huge noise, that kind of, someone's phone goes off, anything that disrupts the show could be considered a heckle. Okay. So, that it breaks that whole monologue and what the expected dialogue is. And then, you can react to that. And a lot of times you can make a joke out of it, but it's weird when someone's being nice like that. You don't even know what to do with it because you can't acknowledge it because it takes you out of character. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like, it's now he's trying to create a verbal back and forth dialogue. Right. And that's not, I think, what helps the show.
Yeah, there's an unspoken social contract there. I never even considered it that way. It was absolutely brilliant. How much research are you putting into a subject before you really start finding the humor in it?
It's interesting. When I first started, I'd write different things, observational, that kind of stuff. And, different comedians have different kind of approaches. At some point, I was given advice from Mary Ellen Hooper, who was a headliner I was working with, and she's like, Jeff, you're kind of bouncing all over the place. One minute you're doing family stuff, next minute you're talking about this construction worker sign, the next minute you're she's like, you're the frustrated funny dad or whatever. That should all That should be everything. Like anything should relate to that. That's
Gotcha.
your truth. You know, if you're doing a joke about something that you don't really know about, it's not authentic to you, right?
Right.
Something needs to be authentic to you. So in terms of research, you know, I think it isn't so much research, and maybe you need to look up words because you need to understand like what something's literally called when you're telling the story. But
Right.
I mean, I think speaking from your truth is where, and your personal experiences is what's going to make you unique. You know, I used to, there was a sign, construction worker, killer injure. It was construction worker, killer injure, construction worker, $7,500. You know, that's a sign on the highway.
Right.
And, you know, so I wrote a joke about it. Well, you know, any comedian that saw that sign could have written a joke about it. Was my joke slightly different than the others? Yes. But if the guy before me did a joke on that sign, I couldn't do my joke. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because that's spent. I mean, the audience isn't interested in two versions of this generic sign joke, you know. So the premise, the shock of it, it's all gone.
This podcast is brought to you by thesuccessfulscreenwriter.com, where you can find instructional books, videos, courses, and screenplays of Hollywood's biggest hits to download. As an added bonus, visit www.thesuccessfulscreenwriter.com to download The Guide for Every Screenwriter for free. Yes, free. Available exclusively at thesuccessfulscreenwriter.com. Now, back to our show.
So slowly I started moving away from those type of things, right? Where I wouldn't write jokes that were so not obvious, but like that anyone could write a joke on that specific thing. Now, when I say family, we all have families, but everyone's experiences are different. Right. And so that's where I started to focus. And then it kind of took me back a little bit because I had to restructure stuff. But what I did is I took one of the things I learned early on that was really, really helpful to me as a comedian starting out in terms of joke structure and even just remembering. I was always paranoid. I could never remember my act. I'd write it on my watch. You know, that's funny. I'm really good at small letter, you know, writing stuff small. But it was a crutch, right? So it was hard to remember. And I remember somebody started telling me a story. This guy Joel starts telling a story about this really great comedian, Norm Stoltz. And he's like, oh, well, Norm had a bunch of routines, and then he kind of threads them together as one story. And I'm like, oh my God, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Because I had all these independent jokes, but then when I think, well, if I made them part of one narrative, you know, like, oh, well, maybe this joke is that instead of that, it was a gift that I gave my wife. You know what I mean? I'm not just randomly talking about an object, you know, so then you start to like thread the things together. And then next thing you know, you got like a 7-minute bit, which is 10-minute bit, which is, you know, maybe used to exist as 5 separate jokes, but now it's one thing.
Yeah.
And since they all weave into each other, you don't have to worry about, oh, now I'm doing this one. Now I'm doing this one. Now I'm doing this one. Because it all becomes this one giant narrative. Once I kind of took that approach, it was amazing because it helped me one kind of structure the jokes, because now I had a common thread that could be personalized to me. And then also I could remember that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, you're a storyteller, right? And that's what you're doing. Yeah. And you're creating this short form narrative. And I love the fact that you say that you have to be authentic, because when you're screenwriting, when you're writing a story, some of the best work that you'll do is when it's an authentic representation of something you've created, or something from you, that your voice as a writer is reflected in this work. And so I can see now how you could take your narrative, making sure your voice is in it and being your truth. And that brings a whole personal aspect of it, which makes it funny. And it's true. I mean, listening to your show, I was like cracking up going, this guy's got it. That makes so much sense to me. And I wanted to talk about just for a moment, struggling to remember your act, because I mean, that seems like a real thing. And I think back to when I was younger and I was watching Janine Garofalo when she first started doing stand-up, and she was doing this stand-up for one of the first times. And I remember watching it. She pulled out a paper and she started reading jokes from this piece of paper, and she was crushing it. I was cracking up. Everybody's cracking up. We thought that was the bit, right? No, she didn't remember her jokes, and she literally wrote them down instead of in front of everybody, and then just started reading them. But you don't see anybody do that. It's absolutely hilarious. So the fact that you had to like write it on your watch and sneak it, almost like we're in high school again, and there's a spelling test or something, I think is totally understandable, because that would have been me if I had to be up there for certain.
Well, I had like code words for each one of the bits. Like it would be like birth. Okay, that's the birth. And then like necklace, if I'm like, so it was like words to remind me what the bits were in the order that I wanted to tell them. But like when you're starting out also though, you're like, you get on stage and you're like, you got 3 minutes, you got 7 minutes, it's very specific, and you have to get off stage. You can't go long and stuff like that. So you have to really time it out. As you start to do 20 minutes, 30 minutes, there's a little bit more looseness. And when you're a headliner, 45 minutes an hour, it's a whole different way of kind of approaching the material and who you are on stage, because you have more time to flex and more time to be you. The reason like people feel so close to the headliner after is because they didn't probably just do 45 minutes of joke like the MC and the feature did. They have time to be human in between and kind of be themselves, right?
Yeah.
They're not necessarily pounding out joke after joke after joke. I mean, some maybe do, but you know what I mean? It's like they have that opportunity to use some of that time to really bond and engage with the audience,
connect with the audience.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. When it comes to comedians that work the crowd, and they'll spend a lot of time just picking random people out of the crowd and then just casting shade at them. I mean, I always find that as a turnoff. I'm not interested in going to a show and then getting called out and made fun of. But there is a genre of comedians that just do that. And I think you're talking about developing that skill as a comedian, where you can be really fast off the cuff and very witty and quick. What is that a skill that's learned? I mean, are there comedians that are just going out there and they're just going to pick people out of the crowd and make fun of them, and that's their whole bit?
I think there's, I think when you make fun of people in the crowd, like I worked with Jeffrey Ross, and he would bring people on stage and he'd roast them, but people wanted that. You know what I mean? It was Jeffrey Ross roasting you, and it was like, that was super cool.
That's what he does.
And I have bits where I go to the audience, and it's a controlled bit. Like I know what I'm going to ask. It's the same kind of beats. I don't know what they're going to say, and that's where it becomes unique show to show. And I'll joke. I like if it's a couple, I'll make a joke about the husband and the wife, and maybe some marriage joke or something like that. But more just kind of just having fun with it. And if they say something really offbeat, then you can kind of go in a little more. But you have to kind of gauge how into it they are, right?
Gotcha.
But the comedians that do it well, like I worked with Paul Mercurio, he used to be on The Daily Show, and I worked with TJ Miller and these guys, when I'm telling you to go into the audience and not necessarily make fun of the people, but like engage with the audience in a way that was as funny as anything you've ever seen. Yeah. And like, even if you've done it a million times and you have a bunch of stuff in your back pocket, when you go into that audience, you don't know what's going to happen. And to see these people do work, do 5 shows or so with them, and to see them do it 5 out of 5 times, it was incredible. Like I would sit there in awe, like how, and then he would thread it together later, TJ Miller, he was like a master of it. I think some of it might be like improv skills too, kind of tied in, which I don't consider, I don't think I could ever go toe to toe with an improv person. I feel like doing stand-up, as long as I've done it, I'm decent at it at a very small level, interacting with the audience, meaning be able to kind of, do something there. But these, I mean, the real good comedians that can do that and control it are like, it's fascinating to watch. Yeah. And, it's like when you're attacking the audience just for the cheap jokes, it's like, I'm not into comedians that don't ever act, I mean? To me, that's not an act. If it's part of it and just, it's 5 minutes of their 45 minutes or hour. It's like, it's fun to watch because it feels authentic to the moment. And that's what people are going to remember. Anytime something happens that you feel like only happened at that show, that's what people are going to remember. And that's what they're going to talk about. And so that doesn't happen at every show because those things don't happen all the time. But somebody walks by, says something, there's a quick reaction from the comedian, everyone just laughs their butt off. I remember like working with this one comedian, this person said something and his return was so funny. And I asked him, I said, did you think of that on the spot like that? He goes, well, the first time it happened, yes.
So he just kept it in his back pocket,
ready
to launch anytime.
This was the 15th person to say that, so it wasn't as unique this time. But the first time, yes.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Oh, very good. Well, Jeff, where can people find you?
JeffIsFunny.com is my website and show website, and that has links to everywhere. My podcast is called Live from Detroit, The Jeff Dwoskin Show. You can go to JeffIsFunny.com and you can listen to all the episodes and then go to Apple or iHeart or Spotify and subscribe and listen there as well, if that's your preference. And then, I'm on the YouTubes and I'm on Twitter at Bigmacher, BIGMACHER. That's my personal. Then the show is at Jeff Dwoskin Show on Twitter and Instagram.
Do you have any tips for any writers out there that are looking to get into developing their own comedy routine?
You write it, you think it's great, and then you perform it. You got to perform it. And the key to performing new material is you probably are going to have to do it a bunch of times before you get it and hone it right. And shorter is always better than long. The more you edit something down and get it as punchy and very specific and bouncy as possible, the better. My one tip is audio record. You can video record too, but at least audio record. There isn't a show that I don't go on. I have my iPhone. I put it in airplane mode. I hit the recorder. I actually use I turn it to don't turn off, and I use the timer on it. So it's recording and it's a timer and it's on airplane so no one can call me. And I put it on the bench, and that's how I keep track of my time, but it's also recording the show. You have to record everything you do because the memory of something you did off the cuff is not going to translate. You're not going to, when you step off stage and you said something that was really funny, your memory of how the beats and the pause and however isn't accurate.
Okay.
You need to actually record everything you do. So then when you have that magical moment where you say something that crushes, you can listen back to it and then teach yourself how you did it by accident.
Yeah.
Because I had a joke where it was like, for weeks I was trying it. And then one time it just naturally came out of my mouth and it killed. And then I taught myself how to do it that way and it never failed me again.
Wow.
So it's like, so listening to yourself and catching those moments, it's imperative. It's imperative. You don't recognize, you don't remember the pauses and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah,
and then here's the worst thing. And this is any comedian will tell you, you'll write 3 things.
Okay.
And you'll think this one's the best. This one's okay. And this one's meh. And the meh one's going to be the one that destroys. Okay.
That makes a lot of sense.
It's the most frustrating thing about being a comedian is the stuff that you don't love as much sometimes does better than the stuff you do. And then, it's just a matter of kind of just adapting and tweaking and stuff like that. But
well, we are our own worst enemies, right? So we're going to think something is terrible and it turns out to be really good. I've had the same thing with screenplays where I go, this is trash. And somebody read it, go, this is really good. And I'm like, did you read it? So I totally get that. And it also sounds like finding your authentic voice is really important as well.
It's like one of those things, like even just taking a comedy class, even if you don't do stand-up comedy afterwards, it'll help you with your business. It'll help you professional speaking, doing presentations at work, doing presentations in front of the CEO, whatever it is.
Right.
It'll help you kind of gain that confidence. So I think doing stand-up comedy in the business world, the business stuff that I do, it's been tremendously helpful.
I bet, because it allows you to break the ice and build a rapport with someone. And I think it would probably even help with screenwriting as of writing and working in those funny bits in any screenplay, which is important. I always like to look at comedy bits in screenplay or funny moments as kind of like a palate cleanser that lets you kind of continue changing the emotional direction of the story. Otherwise, it's just going to become a one note. Well, Jeff, we will make sure those links are available on the notes of the podcast, and really appreciate you being on today.
Oh, it was a pleasure. Thank you for having me. I love being here. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share in your social media where you can tag us at The Successful Screenwriter.